Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of Going Nuclear. I'm here with a really special guest. Her name is Emma Wong. She is here on behalf of the Nuclear Energy Agency, which is a really cool agency. I'll let Emma introduce a little bit more about what they do. But in this discussion, we're going to be talking about a really cool project that the agency has taken on and produced. NEA's Small Modular Reactor Dashboard, which has 2 volumes, and looking forward to deep diving into that dashboard in this conversation. So, welcome, Emma.
Hi, well, thank you, Osama. I'm glad to be here. I know that we've been trying to connect for a very long time this summer, so finally glad to connect. So the Nuclear Energy Agency is based in Paris, and I'm not usually based in Paris. I'm usually based in Washington, D.C. I'm on loan to the Nuclear Energy Agency from the Electric Power Research Institute. But what I'm doing at the Nuclear Energy Agency, which is a um, agency that it was set up by the OECD. The OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And what they do are they have a collection or member states, and which are just governments. Just think of them as governments of around the world. Right now, they have over 30 member states, and the NEA has the majority of those member states as well. And what they do is they really focus in on different aspects that these member states, these governments are focused on. And so it's quite interesting because what they are focused on is not mainly the same things that industry may be focused on, may not be the same things that research institutions may be focused on, but it's a lot of the public good, what will drive economics, what will drive technology, what will drive advancement, and stability. And one of the things that nuclear energy can bring is energy stability and security. So those are some of the exciting things that I'm working on, and that's some of the exciting things that the dashboard can point out.
Quite incredible to see all the different areas which the NEA is supporting. Um, and in terms of the dashboard, just to start off, like I love how the dashboard's introduced with the quote from Henry Ford, right? That if I were to ask the people what do they want, they would say I would want faster horses, right? So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so tell me a bit about this dashboard. Tell me about the whole purpose behind it. Um, and yeah, small modular reactors. What's how is this being used as a resource across the world?
Well, just going back to the quote from Henry Ford, Henry Ford was postulated to having said this, but it's unknown, right? This is a very long time ago, and his whole thing about asking people what they want is all about innovation. All of this is about innovation, and if you were to ask people what they want, they'll tell you, right? At that time when cars were not there, you had a horse, so you want a faster horse. And if you took that literally, you would try to like maybe crossbreed horses or something. But if you think about it in a broader outside the box sense, you'd be like, what they're really saying is they want something faster for transportation. And so you have to think differently. So it's all about innovation, thinking differently. And when you ask your customer what they want, you have to actually not think about it too literally. And so when you think about small modular reactors or just smaller reactors in general, you have to think about, okay, what do people want? People want secure energy. They want a better way of getting energy to remote locations. They want energy that is reliable no matter what, right? These are things people want. Um, right now I'm in the United States. United States, you ask somebody, they would be like, I want reliable air conditioning all the time, 24/7. Doesn't mean, they say so they're not saying what exactly an energy they want. They just said I want creature comforts. I want a lot of different things. And you have to think about it, well, how do we bring that to them? And I will say, nuclear isn't always the answer depending on your environment that you're in, but it's part of the toolbox and it should be part of that answer in your evaluation to see what you need in, say, a remote community. The remote community could be in an area or a place that um, is not suitable for wind or solar. So then you still have to look in your toolbox. What is still there? You have coal, you have gas, you have nuclear, you have geothermal, and then you keep going through your toolbox and you say, all right, let me evaluate now. You keep evaluating down. So what this dashboard does is it looks at beyond technical feasibility of these smaller reactors, because a lot of them are feasible. We've seen a lot in the, I will even hate to say this, before the bigger reactors were even born, there were small reactors. They were tested in facilities. They were not used for commercial use, but they were tested. So a lot of feasibility is there. We know we can build them, but it's just, is it the right environment to build them? And so the NEA, my team, my fantastic team back in Paris, uh, they came up with 6 criteria to do this evaluation. It's beyond technical feasibility, right? You're looking at, is the licensing ability there? Because that's a big part of deploying reactors. Is the financing available? Different parts of the world have different financing structures and different methodologies and models. You're looking at, is the fuel supply chain or fuel even there? We're seeing all of these really new advanced fuels out there. We can build them in a lab. We have these little tiny, bits of fuel, but can you build it if you want to build a fleet of these reactors? You're looking at the supply chain itself. How are we going to build and then deploy everything? And then, of course, you're looking at the biggest part that I have been embracing in the last few years, as I learn more and more about the nuclear history, is looking at public engagement, right? How can we, as a society and an industry, like better engage the public about what might be next door to them, what might be near them? And so it's like, for these smaller reactors, are they going out and are they engaging the public in any way? If they are looking at, and another criteria is siting, right? If they have a site, have they also engaged the public near that site? And so there's so many different factors to deploying a smaller reactor that you have to look at them to see if it's actually feasible. And it's beyond the technical aspect.
Just out of curiosity, how long did this take? Because there's so many SMRs in this dashboard. And also, how did you collect this information? Was it just from publicly available resources, or were there more of one-on-one conversations with SMR vendors as they develop their technologies?
That's a really good question, because I started at the Nuclear Energy Agency in October of 2022. The first dashboard was released in March of 2023. So let's see, October, November, December, January, February, March. That's 6 months. Now, when I started, the team was already well underway. They had already developed the criteria. They had already talked about the criteria with member states, with other SMR vendors, with a lot of the community. So they had already done a lot of the vetting and trying to refine these criteria that were going to be used to do this analysis. I came in and I was like, okay, let's see how we can actually implement all the things you've developed and then put together this dashboard. Of course, it wasn't just me. I have a fantastic team back in Paris. I am just a cog in the wheel to make this go. But I will say, with the team, we had lots of discussions. We only pulled publicly available information. The reason for this, we did have conversation with many of the vendors who said, you know what? We're actually here on your the journey. And I would say, is it public? They're like, no, but this is where we are. And I said, well, that's really great that that's where you are, but I can't be the one to tell the public where you are. I'm like, I have to be supporting my information with something that's out there. And then we do cross reference a lot of this information as well. So, say a vendor said, I have a site at somewhere. we look for information from that site itself, maybe that province, maybe it's that country, maybe it's whoever owned that site, that they confirm that there is interaction and that they are intending to build on that site. So there's a lot of information that we have to go verify in order to make this analysis. I will say, yes, a lot of people have told me they're further along in their journey than we have in the dashboard, but there's no way that I can report that. So I said, if you want us to talk about it, you have to publish it somewhere. You have to have a press release. You have to have someone else verify this. So that's the only way we could do this analysis without telling people other things that even the company hasn't mentioned yet. So that's why we only could use publicly available information.
I think that's a really good approach because if vendors are trying to say that they're at a certain place, it's better to pull from public resources rather than word of mouth. And tell me about the in terms of revisions. I think this is probably an ongoing resource that's going to be updated, just so that utilities can really make the right decisions for them, right? Or utilities, or even other organizations that are looking to use SMRs for mining applications and many other applications. So tell me about how often you plan to update this dashboard.
So the dashboard right now, so I mentioned volume one was released in March. In July, volume two was released, and each one of them had 21 reactors that were analyzed. Now, according to the IAEA ERS database, there are over 80 reactors that have to be analyzed. And from input we're getting from some other vendors, there's more than that have been stood up or created since the ERS database came out last year. So you can see how fast this is moving. The goal for the NEA is to publish and release the third volume, which will be the final volume for 2023 by the end of the year. Now, give or take publishing aspects, it may be in January, it may be in December. But at the end of the year, the rest will be analyzed. Now, it's the rest. I will have caveats to this. It's the rest of the reactors that we can find a human person to verify the information we're publishing. So every analysis that was published in each of the volumes was actually sent to the vendor. Someone looked at it, and they had comments on it, and then they kind of had their say upon the analysis. Right, with any analysis, since this is an independent analysis, we would take back their feedback, and we would consider it, and then we would go forth with our analysis. But there has to be a human behind a reactor, because we realize that some of these reactors that we're going to go looking at next may not have a company that still exists, or may not have a person that's still responding to emails that still exist. So we can't publish an analysis on a reactor that we can't find someone to help verify some of this information that we put out there. So I can't say how many reactors will be in the last volume. You can kind of do some math. It's going to be 40 something, maybe. But if we don't have enough verification from vendors, then it may be less. However, if we have more outpouring, it may be more. So that is the goal. And then to your question about updating it, I get lots of questions about this because so many of the 42 that are already out there, that information needs to be updated already. Like 1 week after we publish it, it's already kind of out of date for some of them because they're like, we have a new site, we have a new agreement, we have this new progress with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I just saw that some people are making strides there. The goal right now is to do a yearly update. So next year in 2024, there will be a call for new information. The team will have to put together the new information, do the updates to all, however many are already out there, and then publish it then in one compiled volume. is the goal. However, if we are able to, I would love to put it online, right? Like an online, able to update when things happen, maybe not every day, but maybe every quarter there would be an update. These are goals that would take a bigger team that we already have. We already have a full team doing an analysis. So I can't promise anything, but what I can say is we will have a volume 3 coming out and we will do a yearly update.
Yeah, I think that's a great goal to target towards. And I think even a yearly update would be really relevant, so that
Mhm.
those that are utilizing this resource can kind of keep up to date and kind of check it out, on a reoccurring basis. Tell me about some of, like, I get the technical aspects; they're pretty black and white. But tell me about some of the non-technical aspects. How do you do research on these? Like, for example, public engagement. It's such a, it could be perceived in a different way. Tell me about the criterias there, and how you guys do that investigation.
Another good question. I will say these criteria, when I got to the NEA in October, were not the same complete set of criteria that was published. As we had conversations, as we were doing research, the criteria evolved over time as we learned more about what was out there. For public engagement, especially, you will see if you read the dashboard, I guess dashboards, since there are 2 volumes, there's a variety of what is considered public engagement, right? There's some easy ones where the company goes out and is talking to the indigenous people. It could be talking to the community at large. Could be, they're on a podcast or they have a press release in like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Very prestigious things to try to engage the public in discussions about what is happening. Um, we also have, if they are engaging with universities to not just for research to help their own reactor, but they're engaging to like train university students or giving information on their reactor to university students to learn from. That's engaging um, a different set of the public, but it is engaging the public and in creating like this narrative of, okay, we have other people who know about this. It's not keeping this within their company. And so we would see varying things. We've seen vendors who have set up programs for training. We've set up programs to learn about the reactor. They have like they invite people to come on certain days to come see the reactor. They don't do this very often. I mean, they're not, giant places, but they've had these events where they invite people to come and tour, and usually at big milestones. So we look through everything that's out there, and we have to talk within our team. Is this part of public engagement, or is this part of a different part of their story, a different part of their journey? I will say there's conversations about, okay, if a vendor is talking to, a fuel supplier, is that public engagement? Well, that's more about getting your supply chain set up for fuel. Or maybe they're doing research with an institution. Well, that's to help them, with their supply chain to make sure that fuel is ready to go. So a lot of things that you may think is public engagement, we have to evaluate and have hard conversations about where does that actually belong on the dashboard. It usually belongs somewhere, but it may fit somewhere else. If you're talking to the hardest ones are about siting, right? Like you're talking to the community and you're also talking to the site owner and you're also talking to the governments. Like, how do they all fit together? So it's fun.
Definitely, yeah, definitely an interesting challenge, right? Kind of putting a puzzle together, almost. It sounds like, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So tell me about yourself, Emma. Like, tell us about how you got involved with this initiative, how you got involved with the NEA. Tell us about your background, and I would love to know more about that.
Oh, sure. So, as I mentioned, I am on loan from the Electric Power Research Institute, which I've worked for I don't know 6 or 7 years before I hit Paris and came to the Nuclear Energy Agency. And it's really a partnership between the Electric Power Research and the Nuclear Energy Agency that allowed my position to be put together. And then all I had to do was really accept it, right? Like at that point, the two entities came together and put together an opportunity, which I just had to say yes to. But I was always interested in looking at international, learning more about the international community itself. Usually based in the United States, so it's very insular. Looking at the U.S., I worked for an international company, but I learned about only the countries that I immediately had worked on. Some of the projects I worked on before, I was the lead on long-term operations, which we're hearing a lot about now in the industry. But what I was mainly looking at was looking at life between 60 and 80 years of operation, which for most of the world is unheard of. The United States, we were right in that moment where I helped push across the finish line to see, some of those applications actually be submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that was very exciting to see that I contributed to helping push that forward, and that technical basis that's pretty solid. One thing that I've always talked about is, can you go to life beyond 80? Can you go out to 100? Can you go out to things beyond? What stops you from doing that? It's an interesting question that a lot of people think about. And then additionally, after that, I had a position where I was the lead of nuclear innovation, looking at things that were more disruptive, looking at things that were just, how do you think outside the box to drive an industry that was looking like it was kind of, is it going to keep going? Are we going to keep extending these reactors? Are we going to build anything? It was very uncertain times. How can we use innovation to improve economics? How can we improve safety? How can we improve every aspect? And I will say it was very fun. I looked at so many different technologies. I looked at robotics, I looked at Spot the dog. Like, can we use this for something? I was looking at AI. I was looking at, blockchain. I was looking at quantum technologies. I was looking at so many different things. And it was really exciting, but it was also really hard at the time just because people weren't sure if nuclear would even keep going. So I was kind of like, I saw all these exciting prospects of technologies that could be paired in this industry and drive things forward. I mean, can you imagine if you had a full digital twin of a nuclear power plant that was fully automated and you can make decisions that were fully informed by physics-based models? I would love to see that one day. I think we're getting closer every day. It's just a very big challenge. And I always like to challenge people. You think big, and in any steps that you move forward in that journey is an improvement. You don't have to get all the way out to your big idea and implement it. You just have to get closer. And that already creates a new atmosphere. It creates improvement, and it also creates this new buzz around this industry as a whole, right? Things are improving. It's slow, but that's okay. But we're doing something. And one thing I would like to mention is that I'm sure you've heard about this before, but there's this global forum for nuclear innovation that's really interesting. At first, when it first happened in 2019, I was like, what are these people talking about? We just need these things to keep running, innovation, like we just need to keep going, right? Well, the whole point of this was, yes, we need to keep going, but we need innovation to keep the fleets moving. So in 2019, in South Korea, some of the greatest minds in the world got together and they said, what do we need to do to get nuclear innovation to go? I was not part of this. I was part of EPRI, and I was like working on a lot of different things. And 2019 was one of the big years for long-term operations, so I was working on that. And they came up with, there are some low-hanging fruit that if we focused on, we could really make strides on, right? And they call them the top four innovations because they're the top four innovations that actually could move the dial. It was advanced manufacturing. It was data sharing, which we're still working on, but I'm seeing movement in the area. Machine learning, which directly contributes to AI and automation. And forget, okay. Oh, and then digital twins. And a lot of these, some of them were more advanced than others, but from 2019 to 2022, when the next global forum for nuclear innovation was kicked off in London, there were massive strides across the industry. There's actually other YouTube videos out there if you want to watch that. But like, it was amazing to see when you had an industry with many organizations focused on, okay, these are the four things we want to work on. We were able to do a lot of great things. So this is kind of like this, if we all put ourselves together and work as one, we can achieve a lot. 2022, the Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation focused on innovation culture. Because now what we were hearing is like, we can do this, but like, how do we foster this culture within companies and that brings more people together, more people to drive more innovation, right? And so, as you, if you're thinking about this, innovation culture is even harder. You know, innovation, people are like, okay, I can put together these project plans. I can initiate these. I get the smartest people. But culture speaks more to people and who people are and how they think. So we had to devise a program to get people to think outside the box, to get them to believe that they could do this and give them tools. So that's exactly what we did in London. And it was truly inspiring to me and other people who were there. And we always talk about, okay, wait, I'm thinking in one way. We have to think other ways to see if we can find a better solution. And so I definitely took a lot of these principles to the SMR dashboard, and the work that I've been doing and reviewing and analyzing SMRs in general is, okay, am I looking at this in one lens, or do I need to look at it in more lenses that gives me a completer picture? And so innovation to me drives a lot of different thinking, a lot of ways that maybe can unlock possibilities for deployment. I really do believe I'm seeing one way we were going to deploy things. Okay, but that doesn't have to be the only way. I see several different markets out there. Maybe those aren't the only markets. If we embrace innovation and look at, okay, well, what could we be doing? And I'm seeing companies do this now. Um, I've seen companies talk about hybridizing these nuclear power plants to do more than one thing. Can they do electricity and steam production? Can they do electricity, steam production, and maybe something else, desalination? Like, there's so many possibilities beyond just producing electricity that I think the possibilities for this industry, if you think about it wider, can be infinite.
That's phenomenal that you had the opportunity to kind of work in that internationally collaborative space, which where where there's innovation that's being fostered, but more importantly, that culture of innovation, right? I definitely think it's a mindset, right? It's we've in the nuclear industry have had kind of that old school approach of these reactors are running, let's just keep running them. But I love that innovation is iteration, right? It's not necessarily we're not looking to, I don't know, solve world hunger, even though I think nuclear it does have some significant benefits, but it's that small iterative impact that can be made and then kind of grow at a large scale. So that's really phenomenal. And one thing that I was wondering was, in the dashboard, I saw a lot of the technologies that were shown were kind of in the range of like electricity production, aluminum melting, and then when you get to that concrete concrete and steel production, you need really high heat, high temperatures. And I think 30% of the world's emissions come from concretes. They come from steel production, material production. So, from
Yes.
your perspective, what are some of the innovations that are happening in that area?
So yes, if you look straight, just what the heat and temperatures needs are, it's very, very high. I think there are some reactors that are trying to, improve themselves to reach those temperatures, and I think there are a few that can do that. But at what cost, right? Like there's always an opportunity cost. The interesting thing that I think people need to think about is the steel and concrete industries themselves are innovating. So, is there a way for them to produce these materials at a lower temperature? I will say that research is happening. And with any industries and needs, right, there could be an inflection point where we may not need to have to get to these high, high temperatures. We do today, but in 5 years, we may not need to. So, and a lot of these are very smart university professors going out there and seeing, okay, can we improve upon things that haven't been improved upon in like more than decades, right? Right? Steel production is more than decades old. And it's worked. It's great. But there's parts, and I will also say it's incremental, right? Like I said, innovation is incremental. And I've talked to some professors and they said, well, if you look at steel production as a whole, right, you don't maybe need to tackle the whole thing at one time. Maybe there are parts of it that have lower temperature, and there are, that you could decarbonize those parts first and then keep moving as you increase and you um, are looking for other ways and innovations to make these things happen. Maybe it will all come together. Maybe it won't. I can't see the future on this, but there are incremental ways you can start to decarbonize these industries first without taking on the whole thing. And so that means we still may need our, fossil fuels to still do, provide that very, very high heat, but maybe we don't need as much of it, right? Um, that's all I can say about that because it's just really, it's can the reactors produce this high enough heat? Is it worth them producing this high enough heat? Because there's always an economics part of it, right? Like you can design a reactor to do this, but is it economically feasible based upon so many different factors if you're doing concrete and steel? Um, and then you can also look at, can you recycle materials? Is that better than just doing things from scratch? That's a big conversation in like concrete, right? Can you just recycle it? Then we're having to just produce it because those are different needs. When you look at energy needs of those areas, so I will just say each industry is different, and all the innovations that are happening together, not just in nuclear, but the innovations that they're doing, we just have to see if we match, like these reactors can match those needs. And maybe it's not economically feasible. That's what a lot of times it all comes down to economics, I hate to say.
Yeah, it's good to know. It's good to know you're seeing the opportunities from different perspectives, right?
Hmm.
And you're right. At the end of the day, our primary need right now is electricity and across the world, right? Because of electrification of industries, there's electric vehicles hitting the market. So that's okay. That does explain a lot. And back to the innovation culture. You've been exposed at NEA to so many countries that are kind of, you know, leading the way for innovation. Are there any specific areas in the world that you see the nuclear industry leading the world or leading the strides in terms of innovation for nuclear technologies?
I mean, you can look at the dashboard and you can kind of see where a lot of the innovations are happening, especially in some of these reactors. But it depends on what type of innovations you're looking at, right? Like, um, if you're looking at who's already deployed some of these smaller reactors, you're like, okay, if you look at the dashboard, you You can see China and Russia are really out there, and they're pushing very, very hard because they have energy needs that they need to fill, right? And they need to decarbonize. So they're pushing a lot harder on these. But then you're seeing Europe that's having this renewed interest in pushing for these as well. And they're funding a lot of new innovations. You're seeing, I will say, you're seeing so many startups coming about. You're seeing a lot of new vendors, a lot of new ideas coming out of universities. I can't say that any one country is really leading the way. I mean, if you had asked me like 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh yes, the United States is leading the way. We have all these great national labs out there. And I'd be like, yeah, Canada is doing a lot too, because I'm seeing so much coming out, of COG, out of the Chalk River, out of all of the labs out there too, right? But I was a very focused. As soon as I started seeing internationally, I'm seeing there's so many more labs out there. I'm seeing there's so many more initiatives that are put on by the Nuclear Energy Agency, by the IAEA, the International Atomic um, Energy Agency. So like there are just so many initiatives out there. I think what's happening now is I think people, okay, yes, there's deployment. You can push deployment. But when you look at innovation, people are realizing that there are smart people all over the world. There's a lot of people working on the same things. And if you just work together, you can do twice as much with the same amount of money, right? And so this is I think a new mindset that's happening is that people are trying to work around the world. People want to have these conversations, but they may not know how to have these conversations. Um, I will say there's an effort to try to build an ecosystem to foster nuclear innovation culture and information like sharing or pairing. But it hasn't really taken off yet because it takes a lot of people to. I don't know if you ever tried to just get people to work on something together from. I wouldn't say all over the world, just maybe all over Canada. It's difficult. And so, but we're building the ecosystem. It's coming together. I'm seeing more people talk more about innovation. I've seen I'm in the Women in Nuclear Global, and they have an initiative just for innovation, which of course I was drafted into immediately. And what I see there are people, all these women around the world who say, we need innovation. How do we foster innovation? Can we do more innovation training to have people talking together, thinking about problems together? And it's been very inspiring to see these younger people who are like, we want to do this. And then lately, I've been part of the World Nuclear University Summer Institute. I just went and taught in Osaka. And one of the modules was innovation. And I will say, once you get them outside their boxes and you just let their minds run free, I was actually surprised at what they came up with, what you could use small modular reactors for beyond electricity. Things that I probably would have been like, really? We're gonna do this? But I was like, I told them there were no barriers. I wanted to see what you could come up with. And I was very, very, pleased with the outcome, right? Like they were in Osaka and they were like, well, can we just make hot springs, hot springs with a nuclear reactor? I was like, sure, why not? Right? The excess heat, you have electricity coming off here, you have excess heat, people are enjoying this. There are models around the world where this has happened with geothermal. Why not be this a solution? Why can't use the excess heat for other things that people may want to do? Another one that I was surprised by because they did some research. You could irradiate wine with, I think, gamma rays. And someone's actually written a paper about this. And you could change the flavoring of it by doing this. I was like, sure, why not? If you have a source, there's no reason why you can't have these other markets. And so it's the power of, just getting people together, thinking outside the box to see what would happen. You just give them a very broad, what would you do beyond electricity?
Yeah, it's a cool activity. That'd be interesting. A hot spring powered on SMR, maybe like a 1 megawatt, or like a very
Yeah,
small.
it would be very small, but like it could be, it's powering a little town or a mine, and then on the side they have this like nice little hot spring perk. Like
For sure, for sure. That's a cool activity, and you from my perspective here in Canada, I've seen really renewed interest in this energy that no one has really ever seen for like more than 30 years, in terms of the nuclear industry, and we're calling it another nuclear renaissance. Tell me from an international perspective, like, do you feel that same energy from across the world, and yeah, like, is it there?
I would say it's there. Some countries it's more robust than others, right? I don't even need to name them. You can just look it up online. But if especially, I'm located now in Paris, so if you look in Europe, you're seeing a lot of renewed interest on what these smaller reactors can do. Um, the interesting thing, I will say, yeah, Canada has so much space, right? The US has so much space. Europe doesn't have a lot of space, so they have more footprint concerns about what they could, what kind of power generation could fit on certain footprints because they don't have as much open space. Canada's got so much, you could probably build whatever you wanted as long as it fit the environment that you're in. So there's a lot of renewed interest, I think, not just looking at nuclear, but looking at any solution that could fit for their needs. They have a lot of needs, especially now that they had like some oil crises, and where's oil going to come from? Where's natural gas going to come from? They've had some relief on that, but then it's kind of like, okay, if you don't have these things, now where's your electricity coming from? So it's kind of like not just nuclear they're going to look at all the energy producing methods in their toolbox. They're going to look at waste heat more carefully. Let's not waste anything. Can we use any waste heat that's coming off of any industrial process and reuse that for like home heating, residential heating, right? There so there's a renewed interest in nuclear in general, I think, just because it's going to be a tool that you can use to solve energy security because there is an energy crisis, I think, and so you're going to need solutions. And if you're looking at like China, for instance, there's definitely interest in nuclear. SMRs, we're going to have to see where they go with that. It's going to be quite interesting. However, in general, you can see they just put out, I think, a news release that they're going to build more large reactors because they need them, right? We don't see a whole lot of news announcements on smaller reactors yet because I think they're going through, what do they need for their energy needs? It makes sense. You've seen Russia; they have these areas out in the, I will say, the Arctic, right? It's very, very cold, right? You're not going to run power lines everywhere. So they're looking at other smaller modular solutions. And so it depends on each country, each region of the world, what their needs are and what you'll see them try to move and have a renewed excitement for. I will say the youth, I've never seen this much interest from the youth before. In my generation, if you look at my history, I've worked a long time, so I'm not gonna say how old I am, but in my generation, like the interest really wasn't there, right? I kind of stepped into an industry that was kind of just going along, it had a false renaissance, and it kind of cliffed off, and then it's like, okay, we're just like moving along. That's why I'm doing long-term operations, right? So this renewed interest from the youth, though, is very invigorating. I think it's very positive. And what I think we need to do as a world is we need to all actually come together to make sure that the deployment is there, supply chains are there, the orders are there. So people's excitement, turns into something that's deployable. But I think everyone in their mind, it's all about climate change, energy security, And a lot of the other world issues, as you said, like food, hunger, water, but a lot of those are intertwined together. And I think this is where we as a society will come together and see how we can solve these problems. Now, nuclear will definitely be a part of some solutions, maybe not all, but I would definitely want it to be considered. And of course, nuclear medicine, it's just fantastic. So we have to keep promoting that. It's not just energy we're looking at. There's a lot to nuclear medicine that's already out there. There's also a lot to nuclear, there's irradiation of food to make it safer. There's also like we use, X-rays for the dentist. We use it to look at, different medical uses, right? So it's very interesting and how excitement happens. Um, Another interesting thing is if you're looking at, say, you're looking at a country that's never had nuclear, and they're like, how do we get into nuclear, right? It's an interesting question, right? Well, some of the easier ways is you start with a test reactor. You start with nuclear medicine. You start with a lot of these other ways that are very much smaller, get used to it, and then you deploy faster. But I think we're at a point in history where maybe that maybe needs to deploy faster, even faster. So how do we make that process even faster? I think that's a challenge that, someone around the world will probably have to take up and see how can you actually deploy this and get countries who want nuclear or want the option to have nuclear actually have that option sooner than 20 years, sooner than 10 years. How can we deploy this in 5? And that would be one of those big goals, but if we make any steps to it, it's still an improvement.
Definitely, definitely. There's a lot of countries I know in the African continent who are looking at these technologies, right? And they're new to nuclear, and it kind of reminds me of the technological embrace of cell phone towers. A lot of countries in Africa, before getting phone lines, kind of leapfrog the technology right into cell phone towers, and ultimately it was a pretty good strategy for them, right? So yeah. So it's another point that I like that you shared was that energy from youth, and that interest that you're seeing. Um, you said that international collaboration is going to be key to deploying faster, cheaper, and more sustainably in terms of nuclear power. Tell me about some of the core strengths or skill sets do you think that the younger generations should be developing in order to facilitate this international collaboration?
It's a very good question. I haven't thought about this one too much. Um, but I think some of the things that the youth will need to focus on is yes, you need to learn nuclear if this is what you want to do, right? Like you have to learn this. Yeah, how do the reactions work? How does the nuclear power plant work? But what I've noticed is that you also need to learn how like an energy grid works. How do you deploy it? You also need to know a little bit about all the other energy sources out there, like wind, solar, coal, oil. You don't have to know it in depth, but you need to kind of know about what are the pros and cons to all of these different other technologies out there, right? You also need to know, I think, more about economics. I know a lot of people are like, a lot of these goals are not really economically focused, but when you think about it, like if you can present your solution and you can talk intelligently about the economics of it, it's easier to be talked about. It's easier to be, I wouldn't say sold, but it's easier to like, keep molding it into something that works. That means you have a very good understanding of like how would it be implemented? How who would actually have to pay for this, right? I mean, we always come up with great solutions, but who's going to pay for it? Who will even adopt it? But if you can think about more about things economically, then I think it opens up a lot of different ways to having people converse. And this isn't different than another thing. Internationally, every region is different economically as well. And so it's a common way to talk about things too, though. It's like almost a common language. And so it's really interesting. I had a good background in economics, but I've definitely at the Nuclear Energy Agency learned more about it. And in learning more about it, it's made me better talking internationally about a lot of these different projects. So I would say it's not just about engineering, right? I mean, I am a chemical engineer. I am a chemical engineer, but you need a lot of these other disciplines in order to work internationally. Another thing that I know some colleges are working on is pairing a lot of like engineering with social sciences. So you learn more about this, like public engagement. How will you engage a public? What are their needs? Like, is there something really simple that they can tell you they want? You can build into, you know, community planning that can actually then deploy these things to be more sustainable in the communities, right? So a lot of these different aspects can really help you deploy things, which a lot of times they don't talk about in school, right? They talk about, okay, this is the process flow diagram. This is how you size piping. This is how you buy the fuel, how you do all of this stuff, but not how you actually will deploy things. How will you get, the government of a country to buy something? So it's quite interesting.
Definitely, it's yeah, the technical piece, the economics, and also that relationship building. I like how you kind of group those three concepts, right? Um, yeah, when it comes to relationship building, I've been seeing a lot of memorandums of understanding, a lot of utilities, a lot of organizations, vendors, and countries actually coming together to develop these MOUs and partner to both deploy technologies, but also to develop infrastructure to do all of these things, right? So tell me about your perspectives on this dashboard. Like, can this dashboard be a resource for countries to kind of flip through and figure out, hey, what's out there, and let's start developing those relationships through this information?
I think these two volumes of the dashboard really give these countries a good starting point. It also gives them a common language to talk about some of the things they might be thinking about. It also gives them some insights on some things they need to be thinking about, right? They need to think about, how are you going to cite this? Where is it going to be cited? What are those aspects? And it's different for every country. So that's why in the dashboard is not very specific to a lot of things, because every country is different. They have their own responsibilities, their own environments. So it gives them a good starting point. And if, say, two countries wanted to work together, it gives them good commonality to talk about a project, something they want to. They can definitely flip through all the reactors if they want to. There are more, but it gives them a starting point. An interesting thing is that depending on what the country's needs are, it can say, okay, these are the microreactors, these are just a little bit bigger, these are the biggest ones. It gives them a good point on that as well. So it's a good way of sorting. But the Aries database from IAEA also does that. You can sort from that one as well. Um, I will say this dashboard is not meant to pick winners or losers. It's basically just to give information, and it's only supposed to be meant as a starting point for someone who's looking into this as their solution, right? And as we've talked about, it's set in a specific point in time. So a lot of these have already made so many more advances. So it gives you an idea. Okay, yes, I want a molten salt reactor that has these temperatures. This one looks like it's going somewhere. I probably need to talk to that company versus this is what this is, right? but it could say, okay, these are all the molten salt ones that are out there so far. These are the ones who've at least made progress in, say, they want licensing in other countries, and then they can go talk to them, right? So it gives them different points of reference that they can look at it for countries. Yes.
Okay, that's great. That's great to know that it's a good starting point. And like, what type of feedback have you received so far since? I know it's just been a few months since this dashboard has been published, so maybe it's a bit too quick for extensive feedback. But what are some of the interesting pieces of feedback that you've received so far?
Some of the interesting feedback, of course, it's overwhelmingly positive, right? It's giving people a good starting point to look at things. Because I will say, there's just so much information out there. And to have this agency actually have gone through it all, vetted it, and verified it, that helps a lot. So that part is very positive. Now, there's always some criticism. People don't like where they're rated in their journey. And then we talk to them and we explain to them, what we have done and things. And we haven't really had much other criticism after that. Usually it just takes a conversation or two. We do have aspects of, can we add additional criteria? For instance, safeguards. Have we thought about, and the answer is the NEA. Yes, we have thought about safeguards, but that's not part of our agency's mandate for safeguards. That's more of the IAEA to do safeguards. So as a, kind of a, PA here, please think about safeguards. However, it's not easy to look at public information on where people are in evaluating safeguards, right? So there isn't a great criteria. We are talking with the IAEA on how we might be able to describe safeguards in future volumes of this, not for 2023, but for in the future. It is recognized that is one of the areas that people should know is an area that um, it's not going to stifle deployment, but it definitely has an economic impact, whether you design for safeguards or if you're just going to implement whatever safeguards are needed at the time of deployment. So there's a lot about these different types of criteria. The other criteria is looking at, kind of the fuel cycle as a whole. What does that look like? Um, and right now, it is on our list to consider probably for future revisions, but we wanted to give everyone a good baseline. And my team, as you know, probably has 40 more to go through. So that is not we're not going to add a new criteria now. Um, it's, it's probably the best recourse. So.
Yeah, it's great to know that there's that overwhelming positive feedback, and it's also interesting to know that you're also looking at different criteria as well to add, right, to potentially to see if this can be improved, or that on an iterative basis. So it's good to know that but this was a really great discussion. I really enjoyed it, learning about this dashboard project, the NEA, and also your experiences in leading innovation from both the global perspective and also from the EPRI perspective as well. So I really appreciate you coming out for this chat. Is there any last pieces of anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
Just keep an eye out for volume 3 coming out probably near the end of the year. And excitingly enough, I talked a little bit about economics. So there are kind of these industrial case studies that we're working on for SMRs, looking at coal replacements, so coal to nuclear, looking at district energy, looking at mining applications, and then last, looking at industrial heat applications. So these industrial case studies, I'm excited for them to come out. It's looking like early 2024 at the moment. So really excited for all things that are happening in this space right now.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Emma. In the description below, you can find the links to both volumes for the dashboard, and also the NEA website, which you can keep an eye out for any updates. But thank you so much, Emma, for this for coming on to the podcast.